like to get started with our second general session for this morning, and we're going to be talking about successful strategies for rental housing, a case study, and our own host, county staffer Mitchell Glasser, will be moderating.
Good morning, everybody. In our panel this morning, we actually supposed to have 3 panelists, but about a half hour ago, I got a call from Albert Milo, our other panelist, who was flying in from Miami, and said that he just got off the plane. And I said, okay, great. Well, you still have time. You could make it. He said, no, I just got off the plane in Miami because there was some difficulties with the plane, and so he basically, is not going to be able to make it. So, I'm feeling fortunate about that because Albert is a key player on the project we're going to talk about, but we're all intimately familiar with it, so we'll be able to fill in. The other thing about Albert Milo and his company, Urban Related Group, is that they were also a platinum sponsor of our conference, and I really think we should give a round of applause for that. I'll talk a little bit more about Albert and his company as we move forward. You will notice this morning our beautiful banners that miraculously just appeared, even though they weren't on the stage yesterday. They were here Sunday, but for some reason they disappeared yesterday morning, and when I arrived, I was a little perturbed that these lovely banners that we had purchased weren't on stage. So, of course, I asked Alex, where are my banners? And she said, I don't know. And so she's frantically looking underneath the stage, over here. She's yelling at the hotel. Anyhow, the hotel took it so seriously that they were actually looking at the security cameras to figure out who stole Orange County's banners. It was getting a little over the top, but finally the guy from the night crew woke up at about noon, called into work, and he said, oh, I put them in some obscure closet, in the back of this hotel somewhere. So they're here, and we're happy to have them back. So, successful strategies for rental housing. I'm going to talk to you about a very large project that we were involved with under NSP, and the experience of that project really was something that I had never experienced in my 22-year career doing this work, and it was both painful, rewarding, exhilarating, exhausting, all those adjectives combined, but it's a story worth telling because there's a lot of things that I think we could all learn from it. So I'll talk a little bit about the background, the multifamily RFP process, and then the project itself, Seville Place and Emerald Villas. And then I'm going to turn it over to our other panelist and partner in this project, Robert Ansley. A little bit of background on Orange County. Our NSP award was one of the top 5, top 10 in the country in terms of dollars for just NSP 1. So we got a ridiculous amount of money, $27.9 million. And as you know, 25% of those funds had to go to low-income families. So when you do the math, that's approximately $7 million. What are you going to do with $7 million for very low income when you already had another $20.9 million you had to do for everything else? I mean, so the math made it pretty strong that we were going to do a multifamily deal. We had no choice. So we had to do a multifamily. We knew that. At the time, there were several multifamily foreclosures in play. There were a few really, really rough ones in play, and we were kind of excited about the fact that with that much money, we could really make a difference in a community, really make a difference in a property. And so our goal was that we were going to do something big. That was our premise. So we issued an RFP in March of 2010. We allocated $7 million in NSP funds and $1 million in SHIP funds. SHIP is a State Housing Initiative Partnership Program. It's a state housing trust fund that we used to get money on a regular basis for. And so we had some money that we could put towards it. We did our regular RFP evaluation criteria that a lot of people do, you know, through an experience, economic viability, cost pro formas, 5-year operating pro formas. But then we added some additional criteria. As I said, we were looking for something big and something different. So we were looking for severely deteriorated property. We were looking for property that had a high crime rate, high vacancy rate. We wanted something that there was going to be community collaboration in the development of this property from both the partnership that was created to redevelop the property and some input from the community that it was in. We wanted to see some project redesigns, and you got bonus points, of course, for green building strategies. So this is the RFP that we laid out. The Board of County Commissioners approved this RFP in June of 2010. That was during an election year for both mayor and some county commissioners, so it was an unfortunate timing, but nothing we could really help given the commitment period. So we had a formal procurement protest from applicants that did not win. We had a lengthy political process and debate on this project, followed by a lawsuit by one of the applicants that didn't win, which was dismissed on June 26, 2010. And you all know what the last one means. Followed by a lot of billable hours. So you need to be careful what you wish for, because we wanted something big, and we just weren't really realize how big what we got. So what we got was a development previously called Seville Place. It contained 444 units housed in 46 apartment buildings on a property that was 35 acres large. It was built in 72 to 74. It was in foreclosure for a long time and had a court-appointed receiver in March of 2009. Let me tell you some other great characteristics of the property. It had a lovely vacancy rate. And when I said high vacancy rate, I really wasn't looking for 70%. I thought maybe 50, 45. 70, I started to get a little scared. It had a high crime rate. And when we were touring the property, which we literally used to feel like we lived here sometimes because we had so many visits to the site, one of the rooms had like a sheet, and it was like where a sheriff would sign in like on a daily basis that he'd been around the property, so they had definitely paid for a lot of overtime police to just cruise through the project. Project needed a new focus. It needed major rehabilitation. There was the redevelopment of Evans High School across the street. This was a very, very old high school, and this is a very large, predominantly low-income community, and there were plans to redevelop that school and rebuild it from top to bottom. It was about a $75 million project. So we were excited about that, and we thought there was some potential here. The scope of the redevelopment was a reduction in density and a demolition of 180 units, construction of a new clubhouse with a rental office, new roofs, plumbing, flooring, fixtures, the things you would do in a major rehab, AC systems, cabinets, appliances, a lot of landscaping, site improvement, a new look. This is at our groundbreaking, and this was my new mayor, Mayor Teresa Jacobs, just been appointed and elected office in 2 months prior to the groundbreaking. And when she came to the groundbreaking, she came up to me and leaned over. I thought she was going to give me like a hug, And she said, Mitchell, she whispers in my ear, "You think you can get me into that backhoe?" And I thought, well, maybe she just wants to get a picture. She goes, "Because I want to take the first blow and knock that building down." Now, mind you, this is my new mayor, newly elected. So I just thought to myself, God, I hope I took my blood pressure medicine this morning. Put my arms around her and I said, Mary, let's go talk to Albert. He's the developer. We'll see what Albert can do for us. So Albert made it happen, and thank God the insurance people weren't invited to the groundbreaking. This clubhouse, which if you come on the bus tour, you're going to see, this is actually where she knocked down that first building. So just think about it. What projects do you do where a developer tears down a bunch of buildings in the front of a complex which has rental units and builds a brand new clubhouse to give a new focus and a new look to a project, and then goes on and tears down another 180 units? What was happening in the community across the street, again, the redevelopment of that high school, it was a $75 million project under construction across the street from Seville. And we saw the potential. I mean, this was not built when we started this project, but it happened as we were trying to get our financing and trying to make the project happen. We knew that between $75 million there, a lot of money from our project, you can get a lot of synergy in this corner of this community. And this project is located really in the epicenter of the Pine Hills community of about 50 to 60,000 households in total, but a very sizable low to moderate income population of probably about 30,000. So this is a big community, has a lot of issues, and has a lot of upside potential. And we were hoping that this would be another stage in some of the efforts that we're all making. The development team was Seville Place Preservation, LLC. It was a joint venture between a private developer, Related Urban Development Group, with over 30 years of experience in affordable housing and revitalization in South Florida. They were new to us. They had never done a project in Orange County. It was the first time that we had done business together. But they partnered with a nonprofit who was local here that we had done over 20 years of work with. The Orlando Neighborhood Improvement Corporation, local not-for-profit developer with 22 years experience. And Bob Ansley over here on our panel is the executive director of that organization. Just a quick overview of the construction costs, just so you could see the size of the project, acquisition, construction, soft costs. And it was a $21.8 million project. You could see some of the source of funds. Tax credit equity was a bond deal with 4% credit. First mortgage, $7 million. Our NSP loan, $7 million. Our SHIP loan, $1.6 million. Owner's equity deferred, $285, and that kind of gives you the sources and uses of $21.8 million. Let's talk about some of the challenges. As I said, it was a low-income community. It was in the heart of a low-income community. It was a low-rent area that had a lot of other apartments in this vicinity, hundreds of other units. So we had market demand issues. We had that extremely high vacancy rate that was really going to be a challenge for us. We had other troubled property nearby that was financed by the state. So they were concerned with putting new money and approving new bond money or tax credit money in an area where they already had a troubled property. There were risks everywhere. When I say there were risks everywhere, there were, as a housing official, and I've done a lot of projects over the years of my career, this was the first one where I felt like I actually had to be a salesman. I mean, I had to go to the properties with the developer, with Bob Ansley. We had to meet the lenders out on the properties, and we had to sell this project, and we had to tell them about the school redevelopment across the street. We had to tell them how much NSP funds we had designated in this area, how many homes we were renovating. We recently created a business commercial district of the businesses to revitalize some of the commercial that was just up the street. So I had to sell the community, they sold the project, and then the lenders would look at us and go, that sounds really good. Do you have anything else for us to look at? And this went on for months. I mean, it went on for almost 6 months. And I was starting to get a little nervous, and I was starting to lose a little sleep because I committed $7 million of NSP funds, and I had no backup plan. No backup plan. So we all really worked as a team. We kept telling our story. The developer had the financial strength. The redevelopment of the school was started to be under construction so you could visibly see it across the street. So we kept telling our story. We have a good plan. We had realistic assumptions. We were changing this asset. We were repositioning it. It was going to have a new look. We were going to reduce the density. Finally, the financial market started to improve. They started to lease up some and take some of that vacancy rate down, but it was still there, and the lenders just saw that vacancy rate, as a problem in terms of income revenue to approve the loan. But the momentum began to shift, and we started to get a lot more lenders. All of a sudden, 3 or 4 lenders started coming to the table after about 6 months of a dry period, which really was tough. Just shows you how long this thing took. I mean, we had to amend the sales contract 6 times. I've never had to call a seller that's selling a property to a developer and reassure him that, county government, we're going to do this deal. You need to hang in there. But when a contract's amended 6 times and you got so much on the line, your career's on the line, yeah, I'll make that call, no problem, I'll take care of it. So I'm reassuring that seller, hang in there with us, we're going to make this happen. Finally, the seller lowered his price, but he required a $500,000 non-refundable deposit from the developer, and he wanted us to close in 21 days. And at that point, we had already put a lot of time and effort into this thing, and we weren't going to miss that opportunity, so we made it happen. We closed on the NSP SHIP loan in April of 2011. We used a third-party servicer for Orange County's loan. Orange County's loan was underwritten by this nonprofit lending consortium, a bank. So we felt like we had a lot of our interest covered. The developer closed on the property in April of 2011, but he closed on his bond financing in December 16, 2011. That's a construction financing. So it's pretty rare that you would close on a property prior to your bond financing being approved. And that was a real leap of faith, and my lender actually advised me not to do that and not to pull that trigger. The slight advantage I had is the person who ran the Orange County Housing Finance Authority that did the bonds was a previous boss of mine. And I spoke to him on the phone, and I basically told him I need to know, what is the percentage that this loan is going to close? And, you've been my friend for 22 years. I need to really know, don't bullshit me, what is the percentage? And so he said, I give it 97%, Mitchell. So I said, well, 3%, I guess I'll roll the dice and roll my career right out the window. Because, I had don't forget, I had a mayor that wanted to knock down buildings on the top of a backhoe. So that's what I was facing. Anyhow, we closed on it. The project's under construction at 75%. It's our main stop on our tour tomorrow. So if you want to really see something amazing, please come. The project is under new management. The nonprofit partner has a unique and strong resident services program. It's different than what you would expect from just an affordable community. Bob can mention a little bit about that. Large reduction in density for this project, new look, extensive rehab, new focal point with that clubhouse. It's an amazing looking clubhouse. I've never seen anything like it, and it's one of the nicest I've seen in all the affordable communities I've ever been involved with here. And it is in the middle of a low-income community that now has a first-class clubhouse with a resort-like pool. So I really feel proud for that community. I think it's something that can make a difference there. New school across the street, a lot of neighborhood collaboration. And that school, let me just talk to you a little bit about that school. That school is being rebuilt in a model that was done in New York City. And that it's not just that we educate the children, but we have to also take care of the family. We got to take care of the health needs of the family, the education needs of that family. So in addition, it's going to be a first-class high school that almost looks like a community college, and it's also going to be a community school with adult programming and health care for the whole family in this low-income community. So a lot of neighborhood collaboration, a lot of community collaboration going into that school. And our $21 million project is right across the street, so big difference there. Okay, so I'm going to sit down and drink my water and take a break, and I'm going to introduce Bob Ansley. But before I do that, I want to just mention that Albert Milo, who couldn't be here this morning, his company is called the Urban Related Group, but prior to that, you know, Albert is one of those kind of guys when you meet him, you know, it's kind of like you're meeting the superintendent, the contractor, the developer, the lender, the real estate broker all in one person. I mean, he's just an amazing bootstrap kind of guy that just has, you know, has risen up from the streets to being a major developer. And it was a pleasure working with him, pleasure getting to know their company. It's a first-class company in South Florida. And with that, I'm just going to basically want to just introduce Robert Ansley a little bit. Bob, I've known for most of my career. We actually both started out of grad school together in the city of Orlando. And then I went out for the private sector for a few years, and Bob took over the Orlando Neighborhood Improvement Corporation, became the executive director. And that corporation that Bob is executive director has about 24 communities in Orange County, containing over 3,000 units. Their organization is a charter member of NeighborWorks, if you're familiar with that. Bob is a member of the College of Fellows of the American Institute of Certified Planners. He serves on the board of the Florida Housing Coalition as past president of the Nonprofit Housing Roundtable in Central Florida. He was the bureau chief for the City of Orlando's Housing Department and a manager of the planning. He served on the Governor's Commission on Affordable Housing in 1993 to 94. He's just a great individual to be a part of our team, and I'd like to now turn it over to Bob, which we can all talk on our seats at this point.
Yes. Thank you, Mitch. Can you hear me? I can't tell if it's on. There it is. Okay. I would normally stand, but in 13 days I get a new left knee. It's not as bad as it sounds because I got a new right knee about 9 months ago, and I'm pretty excited about it, actually. It went very well. I'm going to confess right away that I'm going to jump around a little bit because Albert's not here and try to fill in a lot of the things that I suspect he would have said. And just, you know, if things seem a little out of order, sorry about that, but we'll try to cover everything. First, I want to say a little bit about the history of this project. The neighborhood Pine Hills is a very significant neighborhood in Orlando, and it was the first major suburb in Orlando, and used to be known as where all the people who worked at Martin Marietta lived, which is now Lockheed Martin, I guess, unless they merged sometime between yesterday and today with somebody else. But they actually were co-developers of this hotel. They owned all this land back from 1957 when they came to town. And so, like you said, it's 60,000, 70,000 people. It's a census-designated place, and that place, that designation literally has over 70,000 people in it. And now it's probably one of the most diverse neighborhoods you can even imagine anywhere, from, you know, age, nationality, and so forth. But it's very organized, and they even have their own newspaper. Like I said, it's not a political entity, but they have their own newspaper, the Pine Hills Press. And we learned pretty early that they track everything you do. And they call you all the time and want you to talk about it. But that's a good thing, because it's now that we have stuff out of the ground and it's visible, then the message is spreading rapidly. And I went to the first meeting of the Pine Hills Community Council 2.5 years ago. Mitch said we've been doing this for 22 years. Well, that was 2.5 years. We've been at 24 years. It's been 2 more years since we closed on it. But no, I went to the community council, and they introduced me. And before I said a word, a man stood up and says, "We don't want no more affordable housing." Well, I've been in this business a long time, so what would you expect, you know? There were a lot of foreclosed multifamily properties, and over the last few years, a lot of the multifamily properties had really cycled down the chain, if you will, in terms of the disinvestment and such. So that was 2 years ago, and I think I did a pretty good job talking about it. And finally somebody said, well, you know, at least they're going to fix it up, and it's probably the best deal we can get right now, which is kind of the best you can hope for in your initial meeting. But about 2 months ago, I was at a meeting, and one of the gentlemen who has been there, he grew up in the neighborhood, and now he owns the business his father owned. And he said, you know, when you first came here 2 years ago to speak, I thought you were going to be eaten alive. And I said, well, I'm still here. And I said, I'll take that as a compliment. And he said, yep, you did pretty good. Okay, so we actually looked at this property because we knew about Evans High School. We knew about Pine Hills' visibility and importance within the county policy structure, so to speak. And they'd been doing some redevelopment planning and master planning and strategic planning for about 5 years before this. And we knew this money was out there. And so we took a swing at it ourselves. But because of the 30% occupancy, we estimated it would take up to 3 to 4 years to renovate and get to stabilized occupancy. And that's usually when your permanent lender wants to get involved. So we knew we would have to financially bridge about 4 years of, $8 to $10 million. And at that time, it was just a guess. And we just couldn't find a way to do that. And but we did give it one shot. We really lowballed an offer that would have made offset that, and it was rejected. I think we bought it for $6 million. We offered like $4 million, and that was rejected. And then the county decided to go the RFP process, and the related group was in town, was looking around for projects in Orlando, and I'll get to them in a second. But I got a call from Franz Dutez, Mitch's deputy, and it said, hey, these guys from Related Group were in our office, and they're going to come over and talk to you about maybe working together on Seville Place. And I think a couple other properties were mentioned. And Related is a really big company. It's the Florida affiliate of a New York company called Related Capital, or Related Companies. And just a tidbit, little fun fact, the CEO of Related in New York is one of the co-guarantors of this project. He's also the owner of the Miami Dolphins. So, we're flying high here for a change. But we're not used to talking to these guys usually. But anyhow, so, and I've known the head of Related in Miami, George Perez, for many years. We served on a task force 20 years ago. But he's got a reputation for being a very fairly volatile character. And they had gone from, he started out as a city planner in the city of Miami. Then he went to work for Related as sort of a local Florida rep, if you will. And then he grew the company, and then he became owner of an affiliate that they organized. And then they evolved into luxury housing. And if you watch CSI Miami or something, you've probably seen some of the towers they built on Miami Beach. And when the market crashed, 5-7 years ago, they started thinking about going back to their roots and affordable, because that's how they started. And that's when they brought Albert Milo that Mitch has mentioned a number of times in. So, but when they were coming over to see me, I didn't know they were, had this push into affordable again, and I thought, oh boy, here's somebody that's going to come and, try to use our influence and our access to funds and basically to be a stooge, which is what a lot of private developers do. Usually we kind of just say, well, thanks, but no thanks. But fortunately, and because we have the record to stand behind being able to do things by ourselves and we don't have to sort of roll over just to make some money. Although if the price is right. Anyhow, so Albert came in, and I think within 5 minutes we both all decided that, hey, this could be a good partnership, because just talking to him, we knew that it was his head and his mind was in the right place, and his goals and so forth. But of course, when they leave, we're kind of a little skeptical, like, got to be careful. But anyhow, it quickly grew into a good partnership, and so that's how we got together. And again, Mitch and I had talked about this even before we even contemplated the RSP notion of it, because we knew that this property is so big. It's 35 acres. And it's so big, it's so significant. Actually, one of the current county commissioners lived in it one time. And so we knew that, in talking to, Franz, Mitch, and some of the others there, that the synergy, the impact could be huge. And now Evans was a political football for a long time. They tried to move it. That's the high school. Again, a number of the leaders in Orlando went to high school there. There was a move to move it 3 or 4 miles east, I believe, and then the county growth management, county denied that on growth management and zoning issues, I believe. And so they decided to tear it down and rebuild it. And I'll get in a minute to the actual components of the school that are excited. So there's that redevelopment thing, and then the redevelopment plan was going on. So, and then of course they put out the RFP, and it took us about maybe a year and a half or so to get through that, and about $70,000 in legal fees, which is another good reason, good thing, our good luck that we had Related as a partner, because they just wrote a check for that. And I don't think they show up really, to be honest with you, in the pro forma. We mentioned the redevelopment plan and the community council and their skepticism, but we've delivered before. Acquisition and rehab is our forte, and if you can just get people to hold on, and then when you show them the product after you've totally renovated something that's been a disaster, really it's really easy to win the people over. Another unique thing about the RFP was it not only asked for an extensive resident services program, but it asked for extensive collaborations. And we put together, I think, about 17. Most of the people who we have worked with in the past, job training, banks, financial literacy. Boys and Girls Club is a mile away. There's a lot of immigrant in that neighborhood, so we had some relationships with different immigrant organizations in some of our other properties. So they all signed on as partners, and we didn't actually know about the details of the community school at Evans at the time, because it was kind of being formed along a parallel track. And they weren't in a position, they didn't even have a director at the time. So I think we put together a pretty impressive array of collaborators. I started to say collaborators. Collaborators and our services are proven. So, and actually because of the financing, because of the $8 million or $6 million equity in the 1.7 in ship and home, the pro forma actually provided some room to pay for services, which is, if you're on my side of the business, that's always a struggle. So we saw that as something that could go a long way towards supporting itself. The something that worked for us on time-wise is when we originally started the development, we did not anticipate using bonds and tax credits because the tax credit market was pretty much had dried up, especially at the 4% level that you couple with tax-exempt bonds. We were told there were no market for it, and even if there were, the pricing would be something 30, 40 cents on the dollar. But then we found out that the Orange County Housing Finance Authority had some new initiative bond program, or NIBP bonds, that were reserved by a different developer but had gone unused. And I guess I'll reveal for the first time, that developer who reserved them but didn't use them is the one that protested our victory in the RFP. So if they had used those money, we may not be here. But so we snatched their money away from them in a way, I guess. But they weren't going to use it by that point. But anyhow, the bond rate was around 4%. And there's a guarantee by the Treasurer. There were a one-time bond program that came to some of the stimulus activities. And if I say any more, I'll get it wrong. That's about all I know. But it was sitting there literally on the shelf ready for us to use. So then we started talking tax credits. And then so the Related's CEO, Related to Florida, George Perez, he said, well, if worse comes to worse, I'll buy the credits. But he says, I'm only going to buy them for 35 cents on the dollar. So that's what we started started our pro forma at. But over time, the market came back, and we ended up selling the credits, I think, for 90 cents on the dollar, and roughly. So we got, we got ended up with $5.5 million in credit equity. We probably would have had maybe 40% of that. So that made a huge difference. So in that way, time worked on our side. Now, another question you might ask is why you got a property that's 70% vacant, and it's been that vacant for 3 to 4 years. The owner was a company out of Houston that owned 20 properties nationwide that were all in foreclosure. And the disinvestment was apparent as you approached it from the street in your car. I mean, that far away. Letters missing on the sign and things like that. Especially if you knew what it had been like before. But if you can see from some of the pictures, it's almost all one story. It's all concrete block, or what we say has good bones. In Orlando, in Florida in particular, termites and moisture, water intrusion are our biggest enemies. So we like to do concrete block whenever we can. So that pretty much we have a rule of thumb that we can do anything with concrete. We can bring anything back to life if it's made out of block. And it was a good site plan. Like I said, it's the density was low. Now we've demolished 180 units. Number one, because the 444 is a really big property to run through one office. You don't really get enough traffic, leasing traffic, to fill it. It's just constantly struggling. Secondly, there wasn't enough money to do all 444. So, but we thought we wanted to build one centralized clubhouse. It had 4 little activity buildings around swimming pools, but we wanted a big clubhouse on the street, very visible as a signal and all to the neighborhood. So we had to tear down, I think, about 20 units for that. But that land where we demolished the units will be a combination of amenity, outdoor activity space, and a future phase of potentially some elderly housing is kind of what we're thinking about today. So, and because they were vacant, it was not a relocation issue, if you will. But it just kind of that's the way we had to do it. But the density right now is going to be about 9.5 per acre, which is pretty darn good for affordable housing. I mean, it may not be the most efficient use of the land, but it's from a livability standpoint, it's creates a nice feel. Let's see. Now Now, let me talk about a little about I was going to back up the collaborations. We have like the University of Central Florida School of Education. Chase Bank gave $175,000 to the community school at Evans High to hire their first executive director. So let me talk about the community school somewhat. Now, community school sounds like a generic term, but if you're familiar with the Children's Home Society, which is a national, and each state or most states have a chapter, if you will, they have a model called community school. And so it's community school with a capital C and a capital S. And basically, that school, it's a giant community center using the high school facilities. It will be open 6 days a week from 7 to 9 or 7 to 10. I think they've decided. We'll have a medical clinic and a dental clinic on the school property. That's for the neighborhood, not just for the school. And so there's a parent resource center that's, I think there's a kickoff on it on the 13th coming up. And because a lot of the issues with the neighborhood and the school has been engaging the parents. And a lot of times you can get, as we've learned from our experience, you can get to parents through the children. So there's all these kind of resources, and I can't tell you much more than that because I can't, it's just beginning. But it stands to be a really, really nice thing to have. Plus, it takes a little bit of the heat pressure off on us to provide services for every possible need. We'll work together, obviously, and see how we complement each other. And having Evans across this new school with all its bells and whistles across the street from us is an immense leasing positive. And vice versa, we think that we're helping making the school a little more desirable to attend. I think are they an A school now? If they're not, they're close to it. They were an F school, and I think they're a B or an A. Unfortunately, their principal's moving to California. He's seeking new challenges, but they had this real dynamic principal that came in about 5-6 years ago and has really made a big difference. Okay, we talked about the neighborhood, and pardon? Yeah, okay. Credits, leasing, the clubhouse. The clubhouse is new. If you see in the picture, it's brand new. It's, that wasn't, if you're thinking, hey, that looks pretty nice, that wasn't what was there before. But hopefully, I don't know how many people are signed up for the tour, but I think you'll be really, really impressed. Related is a company that works in the highest levels of the atmosphere in multifamily development and the highest income levels. And if you come out to the property, I think that'll be evident in how we've decorated the clubhouse and just the quality of the redevelopment. One thing that I'll close and say that when Mitch was talking about, hey, we closed on the land in April and we didn't close the bonds until December. Well, the reason is that the seller, the seller was actually still, it wasn't a bankruptcy trustee, I don't believe. It was actually an affiliate of the bank, but it was in the bankruptcy process, which made it eligible for NSP. But I once read that all decisions in real estate or agreements are reached at the intersection of fear and greed. And clearly that was the intersection of fear and greed. So anyhow, thank you.
Okay, so we'll now.
Questions? Thank you.
So that's our story on our journey, and we're really happy that we made it to the end of that journey, and we both have jobs, and we can smile, and we can now share in our happiness that the project really is probably about 80% complete now.
Thank you.